What lurks in the darkness, just waiting out of sight? The Paranormal Scholar invites you to sit down and listen to these allegedly true tales of paranormal encounters, submitted to us by our subscribers and narrated in part by the horror narrator Swamp Dweller.
I have a story to tell about a little town called Phalke in Arkansas. In the 1970s, the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek was released. It told of the Phalke monster, a bipedal, Sasquatch-like creature, which was claimed to have been sighted in the area since the 1950s. It was accused of destroying livestock and even attacking a local family. After watching the movie, my curiosity was up, so one day, I made my mind up to go investigate for myself. I made my way to Phalke by hitchhiking. It was a little after 1 in the morning when I finally arrived. There was very little in the way of street lighting, so the town was pitch black, to the point that you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. You couldn't even see the road you were standing on. You could just feel the surface of it under your feet as you walked. After around 20 minutes of walking, I was outside of town. It was when I started hearing the noises. Noises unlike anything I have ever heard before in my life. They were something of a roar, but more creepy. I stopped at the edge of the trail, listening for the direction of the sound, hoping to identify the source. The night was so black, I still couldn't see anything at all. Then, suddenly, I felt hair, something kind of brush against my face. It was accompanied by a god-awful smell. I froze. I am not sure how long I stood there, frozen to the ground, but it felt like a very long time. My brain was telling my feet to move, but they just wouldn't respond, either unwilling or unable. It was like I was being circled by something. I could feel it was there, even if I couldn't see it. Eventually, I started to run. I ran until I couldn't run anymore. Thank God I stumbled across a convenience store. It was closed, but it had its lights on outside. I went to put my back against the door and sat down. I must have dozed off, as the store owner found me there in the morning and woke me up. After buying a drink and some cigarettes, I was on my way. The smell of whatever had approached me last night still lingered on my clothes. I tried to dust myself off, but ended up pulling brownish, black hair off my clothes. I don't know what kind of animal they came from. All I know is that after my little investigation trip, my mind was made up. I will never go through Phalke, Arkansas, ever again.
Everything I write in this story is true. Yes, that is a cliché, but that doesn't change the fact that my tale is completely true. The legend of Mercy Brown is well known in Rhode Island, USA. She was suspected of being a vampire, so, amongst other things, the ground around her grave in Exeter was scorched, and for decades nothing grew. To this day, it is easy to tell which grave is hers, as a giant brown circle devoid of any vegetation encompasses her gravesite. Years ago, I had a girlfriend who lived in Exeter. It is a rural community in the central part of the state. Neighborhoods lack streetlights and are surrounded by a thick, dark and dense sea of trees. It is very easy to get lost, and even if one has his bearings, it's still very creepy. One night, my ex-girlfriend and I drove through the thick forest to visit Mercy Brown's grave. Both her and I are atheists and just went to the cemetery for some spooky fun. It was early October and there was a sharp chill in the air. We walked towards her grave, which was easily discerned even in the blackness of the remote graveyard. True to my rebel nature, I began to dance above and on Mercy Brown's grave. My ex told me to stop, but I continued to make a fool of myself, spitting in the face of conventional tradition. We then left the cemetery and went back to her house. The next night, I was back at my place. I happened to be living in a hotel near my university. I only needed a place for a semester, and the rate was surprisingly low. That night, I slept deeply, only to be awakened in the morning with a multitude of what appeared to be large, swollen bite marks on my legs. I brushed it off as being the work of the ever-present, if slightly larger than usual, mosquitoes around New England. However, upon further reflection, I realized that several frosts had already occurred, killing off many of the mosquitoes, and driving the survivors to seek refuge in the plethora of damp, fallen leaves that abounded throughout the region. Not only that, the bites didn't itch, which is normally a telltale sign of an insect bite. Next, I thought that the bites might have been from fleas, but I didn't have any pets, nor did I interact with any animals whatsoever. But regardless, I still bug-bombed my hotel room. But the bites didn't cease. Bedbugs, that must have been it. Or so I thought. I asked the hotel to inspect my room for an infestation. When they came back and told me that they didn't find anything, I didn't believe them. The bites were still scarring my legs. After all, I had agreed to stay at the hotel for several months, and finding an insect infestation could be a way for me to get out of the contract. Not to mention a PR disaster that would await them if the case of bedbugs was to be found in the hotel. So I had a hard time believing my complaints were unwarranted. Understandably pissed, the manager herself went into my room and tossed my mattress and headboard, showing me that there was no sign of insects anywhere in my room. Convinced but not satisfied, I threw away my shoes and socks in the hopes that they would get rid of my phantom aggressors. Once again, the bites continued. By now, I was very confused as to the origin of the bites. After about a month of waking up with new red piercings in my flesh, the bites stopped. Just as randomly as they began, they stopped. I still can't explain the bites on my legs. I am naturally a skeptic of the supernatural, but Mercy Brown and her vampirism very well could have been behind my markings. To this day, I will not step foot in Mercy Brown's graveyard, and I will never dance on a grave again.
This happened to me and a few friends back when I was 17 years old. I am 50 now, and since that time I have never experienced anything even remotely paranormal again. But the event that I am about to describe had such a profound effect that my interest in the paranormal was sustained for all of these years. It's the reason I subscribe to all of these channels concerning anything paranormal or otherwise creepy. Real stories interest me the most. After what happened, I cannot be a skeptic. It is simply not possible. The events took place in 1984. I don't remember the exact start date. It was sometime during the summer, but I know it ended on November 2nd, around 3:15 a.m. My small group of friends were all between the ages of 15 and 21. My girlfriend at the time was 21, but no one else was older than 18. So as kids in our mid to late teens, we used to hang out like everywhere. It could be deep in the woods, abandoned buildings, you name it, the stranger the better. That being said, the area that this took place was anything but. We parked down a residential street. To our left and across the street were houses, and to our right was a sidewalk and a row of bushes, a fence, and beyond that a large park. Unlike our usual haunts, there was nothing strange or creepy about it. In fact, it was a beautiful setting. We would go there whenever we did not have alcohol, as cops patrolled the area regularly. We did what anyone of age would do back at the time, hang out, listen to music, and talk about whatever. The very first time we parked there was a summer night, and it was just me and my girlfriend. I'll skip the details and get right to the strange points. At some point, during the night, we each heard a bang on the back of the car. Roughly 5 to 10 minutes later, there was another. My girlfriend and I looked at each other. It just sounded like something was inside the trunk of the car. My girlfriend said that she had unloaded boxes from her trunk earlier that day, and a squirrel must have jumped inside and got closed in by mistake. Her sentence was almost immediately followed by another bang. Unable to offer another explanation, I agreed that it must have been a trapped animal. I got out and opened the trunk, stepping away as I did, expecting a frightened animal to fly out. However, nothing did. There was nothing there. I got back inside the car. The banging continued. Once again, I got out and investigated the trunk, this time checking it from top to bottom. Still, nothing there. Confused, we decided to leave. At some point, the incident was all but forgotten, and we went back. This time, it was a gaggle of us. If I remember correctly, it was 2 couples and a third wheel. So, 5 of us in one car. At one point during the night, the same banging my girlfriend and I had experienced started. Every 5 to 15 minutes we were hearing a bang on the back of the car. I asked if one of my friends would get out and bang on the trunk with his fist. He did so, and it sounded exactly like the banging noise we had been hearing. Over the course of the summer, regardless of who we brought with us and what car we were in, the banging continued. It always bothered me, but I learned to ignore it. Strangely, it only ever happened at night. Anytime we were there during the day, there would be nothing. At this point, I want to stress that this was 1984 and I was 17. There were no smartphones or social media. There wasn't even an internet. Anything and everything I knew was from word of mouth, books, or someone telling me face to face. I was a clueless idiot. I had never heard of the Lady in White, skinwalkers, or any urban legends. I was a blank slate. So, what I experienced over these next 2 nights was all new to me. It was October 31st, Halloween night. On this night, it was just my girlfriend and I in her Camaro. We were parked in our usual spot. There were no cars in front of us, so we had a clear view of the street right to its end. Sometime during that night, we saw a cat jogging merrily down the road in front of us. This is nothing unusual, but it wouldn't have caught our attention normally. However, the cat kept jogging towards us, and we appeared to be its target destination. It came all the way down to the car until it jumped on the hood. We both snapped back in our seats. The cat stared at us for about 2 full seconds before it jumped off and ran across the street. I remember telling my girlfriend that I might have been worried if it had been a black cat, but it wasn't. Although it had been a little bizarre, we brushed it off and remained. Later on, we heard leaves being crunched to my right and behind the car. I could see right to the bush line in my mirror, but there was nothing there. My girlfriend said it was probably just an animal. I said no, it wasn't. They were someone's footsteps. I could hear them clearly. Footsteps between the bush line and the fence, drawing nearer to us. Still, I couldn't see anything. Once the footsteps were close enough that they were near the back of the car, my girlfriend put it in drive and took off. The following night, November 1st, we returned. After Halloween night, my curiosity had been piqued. We parked just shy of the bush line. Most of this night passed without event, other than the usual bangs. Then, at some point during the night, I saw a woman walking across the street towards us. She was young, with shoulder-length brown hair. As she drew closer, she started to unnerve me. She was extremely pale, and was wearing clothing not of this period. I quickly glanced down at the clock, and it was 3:15 a.m. When I looked back up, the frighteningly pale woman was coming closer to the passenger side of the car. My window was down about 10 inches. I instinctively decided to roll it up out of fear. However, I couldn't move my arm. I looked up to see the woman gesturing to me with her hands as she walked. At first, I thought this maybe was sleep paralysis, despite never having experienced anything like this before. However, the terrifying woman continued gesturing, moving in my direction. I could still feel my entire body. I just couldn't move more than an inch in any direction. It was as if invisible restraints were on every limb. I tried to call out, but could only raise my voice above a whisper. I thought this woman was a witch, binding me. I tilted my head to my girlfriend, but she was fast asleep. I whispered her name and tried to bang my foot against the floorboard in an attempt to make her wake up. This didn't work, so I put all of my attention on trying to roll up the window. I finally broke free of the woman's power, when she was only about 2 feet away from the window. As soon as I could move again, she vanished. I was terrified, and frantically rolled up the window. Before I had the chance to wake up my girlfriend, something jumped on top of the car, and all I could hear was the metal buckling, and the car rocked up and down. My girlfriend woke up immediately. I got out of the car, but there was nothing there. I hurried back in the car as my girlfriend started to drive off. As we were approaching the park limits, we heard yet more action on the roof. Something was still up there, moving around and making lots of noise. I was just stunned and didn't know what the freak was going on. Then, the rear of the vehicle dropped down suddenly and back up again. It was as if something very heavy slid off the back. I stared out the back window until the road turned and exited the park area. Once again, I saw nothing. Needless to say, we didn't go back. 5 years later, when I was 22 and retelling the story to a group of new friends, and yes, a new girlfriend, some of them wanted to see for themselves. We went back, but nothing happened. No bangs, no cats, no footsteps. Whatever had been there those nights was gone. There's a theory that young people in their teens can manifest things like this. Certainly, I could explain the terrifying witch woman as hallucinations or sleep paralysis. On their own, each event, the cat, the footsteps, could be explained away as an oddity, but a big part of me knows that this was not the case. Something jumped on our car that night. Something banged the car throughout the summer. Regardless of who I was with, or what car we were in, there was something about that particular place. Considering everything that happened there, can I truly explain anything away?
There is an old Quaker cemetery a couple of miles from my house. To get there, you have to drive to a path behind a local airport, and then walk 3/4 of a mile through thick woods. The walk normally takes around 10 to 15 minutes. This particular cemetery is infamous among the local community, with many stories and urban legends associated with it. Some say that a boy hung himself there in the 1800s. Others report a roaring sound coming from the woods surrounding it. To some, the cemetery is known as the 7th gate to hell. The legend goes that, spread throughout the US, there are 8 cemeteries known as the 8 gates of hell. Admittedly, America has no shortage of haunted graveyards, but these 8 are said to be the worst. Supposedly, the location of the 8th cemetery is only revealed after visiting the first 7. There have been maybe a dozen accounts of such searches going on, but only 2 claim to have ventured to the final secret location. It is said that no one heard back from these people again after visiting the 8th cemetery. None of this really deterred me from checking out Spidergate Cemetery. My friends and I quite often visited it at night because we liked the thrill of thinking there might be something actually paranormal in this area. I've always been a firm believer of the paranormal, but I've never been scared of anything I've heard. One night in mid-October, my friends and I decided to go to the cemetery again. It was still quite warm, and I picked up my friends from their houses and drove them to where we had to start walking. I've been to the cemetery during the day and at night more times than I can count, so I knew precisely how long it took to walk the path and what the surroundings looked like, even at night. When we reached where the tree line began, everything seemed normal. However, when we got to the creek which marked the halfway point to the cemetery, I started to feel uneasy. I had never had this feeling before during the previous times I'd gone to this place. Unnerved, I looked around. My friends asked me what was wrong. I brushed it off and told them it was nothing, joking that I was just trying to freak them out. However, the uneasy feeling just kept getting worse the closer we got to the cemetery. A little way past the creek, lightheadedness washed over me, and I started getting tunnel vision. Once again, this sort of thing had never happened to me before, and I had felt fine at the start of the walk. It was then that I noticed the surrounding area looked different from usual. Not only that, but the walk to the cemetery seemed to be taking longer than normal. Around 100 yards from the cemetery gates, my tunnel vision and lightheaded feeling went away. my friends and I went into the cemetery and walked around for a bit. The uneasy feeling still troubled me, but nothing out of the ordinary happened. After a while, we started our walk back to where we had parked. All throughout that walk back, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched and followed. There was a tightness in my chest and a constant chill down my spine. I told my friends what I was feeling, and they said that they felt like something was watching us too. In silence, we hurried through the woods. This time, the walk took the usual amount of time, and the surroundings looked familiar. When we finally reached the end of the woods, the heavy feeling in my chest lifted. The sensation of being watched, however, remained. It was like I could feel eyes on me. Terrified, I didn't dare look back until I was halfway to the car. At that point, curiosity got the better of me. I turned back to the entrance to the woods. There, at the tree line, was a dark figure, just staring at us. Unmoving, unflinching. I knew we had to get out of there. We jumped into the car and sped away. I wasn't satisfied until we were back on some main streets that I knew, away from the wood in the cemetery, away from that figure. It had followed us, and then just stood there watching as we went back to my car. I haven't been back to the cemetery since, but plan to go back now that the weather is warmer, to see if it happens again. This was the first time I have been genuinely scared by this kind of experience. I will never think of Spidergate Cemetery the same way again. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Real Paranormal Stories. I would like to extend a big thank you to Swamp Dweller for his narrations. Please be sure to visit his channel for the second half of this collaboration, where we narrate yet more paranormal stories together. Simply follow the link on screen. Remember, the more you know, the more there is to fear.